welcome to the Blue Shoes Fitness Podcast, where we talk about strength training, nutrition, faith, family, and how all of those things work together for parents like you and me. My name is Coach Jay, and today I want to share 10 things that I wish I knew when I started my fitness journey. Seeing as this is the first episode of the year, I want to encourage any of you listening, if you're picking up fitness for the first time ever, for the first time in a while, or if you're just looking for a fresh perspective on your training and nutrition. Before we get into that, let's kick things off with the verse of the week. And today I'm reading out of Acts, the book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 42 through 47. This should be a pretty familiar passage if you are familiar with the New Testament at all. It says, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved." Wow, this is one of my favorite passages in the New Testament, and I think I was initially attracted to this from the very first verse of that, of Acts 2:42. And if you've been around church for any length of time, you may have heard of the idea of an Acts 2:42 church or something like that, where you have the four elements of what the early church devoted themselves to, that being the apostles' teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayer. I want to focus on just the last section of this passage here, and just thinking of the result of those four devotions that way, and just the beautiful imagery of the early church. And I think about this primarily because we have a friend group. We have another friend couple that are our best friends and have been so for the last 7 or so years, the entirety of our marriage. And when I think about how I would describe our friendship with them, I look to this passage and think this is exactly what our friendship looks like. And it is such a blessing to be in a friendship that's not just based on mutual interests, but it's based off of a mutual core mission and priority, and that being the kingdom of God. And so, man, this is just awesome. And if you don't have either a friend group or a Bible study or a church that prioritizes these things or that looks like this, I would encourage you definitely to find that kind of community. And that can take time, but it is worth the time and the effort to be a part of that, and to not just receive from that, but also to join in on that as well. All right, let's talk about today's topic, which is 10 things I wish I knew when I started my fitness journey. And this is a pretty popular format of especially this time of the year, and I wanted to jump in on that. But I do have a confession here that this list of 10 things that I wish I knew when I started my fitness journey, it started out as 10 things, and then it became 11. And the way that I have this split up is the first half are just kind of general principle based things that I wish that I had known early on. And then the last half is the more specifics on some specific scenarios. So it started out as 10 and then became 11. And so I had five in the first half and six in the second half. And I thought, well, that's a little uneven, but maybe I can still get away with calling it 10 things. I just have a bonus thing at the end. But then I was like, well, let's just maybe even it out with six and six. So then it became 12 things. And at that point, just it's total anarchy and there are no rules anywhere. So there are actually 13 things on my top 10 list. So buckle up. If that's a problem for you, then I'm sorry that's going to be that's what you're dealing with in today's episode. So this is the 10 things I wish I knew when I started my fitness journey, which is actually 13 things. And that kind of points to the big picture of this list here. Is this is not an exhaustive list. There are many, many, many things that I wish that I had known when I began my fitness journey. And to give you a little bit of context, I had the athlete turned weightlifter or turned fitness junkie story, and that started way back. I played soccer all throughout childhood. I think I started as soon as I could walk and played all the way through the end of my senior year of high school, and that journey ended there with soccer. I was okay at soccer. I was never, the top star athlete of it. And that kind of made me think, I'm not sure that this is really going to be a viable option for college, and that's maybe not going to be worth the time and money, for that. And so that was when I found the weight room, and I was the scrawny little kid. I've always been short, still am, but I used to be a lot lighter as well too, and just didn't really have a whole lot of muscle outside of my legs because of soccer. And so found the weight room and fell in love with just the various aspects of fitness and weightlifting and strength training. And so that was how I got into fitness. And my fitness journey absolutely began with looking to the authorities of Men's Health and Men's Fitness and bodybuilding.com, and when that was just a page of just a bunch of forums online where people could ask questions and answer them too. And that was the extent of my fitness knowledge before going into college, which then I studied exercise and wellness, and so I learned it from a more academic point of view at that point. But getting into it, I really didn't have any sort of a guiding set of principles or really even a specific goal of any kind. It was very much based off of what I had seen in those magazines, what I had seen on, I ran through P90X a number of times. I don't think I ever finished the full 90 days of it, but each time I did it, I probably got about halfway through. So maybe that's a relatable story of if you're listening and thinking, yeah, I kind of got into fitness just sort of by happenstance, or maybe you had somewhat of a goal in mind and that was maybe half-hearted, kind of like mine was, where I just got into it and started going from there without a real direction or without a real passion for it. And when I say that I fell in love with it, that took many, many years to actually enjoy the fitness side of it, as opposed to feeling like I needed to pursue fitness for the sake of other goals. And so this list here is, in particular, the first half of this being the principles based side of it, the first six of my 10, but actually 13 things I wish I knew. These are hopefully going to be really relatable to you. And like I said at the beginning of this episode is really for anyone, but it's especially for those who are getting into fitness for maybe the first time ever or the first time in a while. Or if this is just something that maybe you're changing directions with your fitness, or maybe you're taking it seriously for the first time ever or in a while. I hope that this is helpful for you. So let's get right into it. Number one thing that I wish I knew when I started my fitness journey is that progress is more exciting than variety. And if you've been around Blue Shoes Fitness for any length of time, you are aware of that I'm a huge fan of progress over variety. And those things are certainly not mutually exclusive. But what I mean by that is a lot of times when things start to get boring in your fitness journey, whether that's with your training or with your diet, or with any of the associated factors with that, a lot of the times our natural instinct is to introduce lots of variety into our program. And that's one of the big draws, among many, but one of the big draws for programs like CrossFit, where you have WODs, you have workouts of the day that are never the same, and it's always something new every single day that you're doing your training program, or diet plans where you have a new breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day of the week. And those have some pretty significant drawbacks as far as the programming side of it, deciding what to do every single day in the gym or deciding what to eat every single day of the week for every single meal. You're changing everything up. But outside of that, too, variety can kind of confound the variables that you're tracking with your program to know, okay, am I actually making real progress in any significant way? Or am I just switching things up constantly and feeling like I'm being productive when in reality, I'm not actually making any real progress in any meaningful direction? And so, I am a huge fan of sharing with my clients that progress and making progress can be so exciting. And that's, I mean, the nature of why you are into fitness to begin with. And even if you don't have one specific leading goal that you're trying to get to, making progress in any metric can be a really exciting thing. And it's going to take some time. And to kind of overlap with point number two here, it's not always going to be linear either, but making progress and pursuing progress, I think definitely can be more exciting than just constantly switching things up for the sake of variety. So, leading into number two of something that I wish that I knew was that progress isn't always linear. And maybe a better way of phrasing that is that progress is rarely linear. And what I mean by that is no matter what metric of progress that you are tracking, whether it's your body weight on the scale, whether it's a certain strength that you're trying to achieve on a certain lift, the amount of weight that you're able to lift on a certain exercise, no matter what your metric is, progress is rarely going to be linear, meaning that you are not always going to be able to add 5 pounds to your squat or your bench press week after week after week. Think about if you did that, of what that would look like over the course of a year or two, and you would be likely in world record territory if that were the case. Same thing with the scale. If you are trying to lose body weight or body fat, if you constantly lost 1 pound every single week, by the time that you get to the end of a year, you'd be 52 pounds down, and that would be easy enough. And just carry that logic out 2 or 3 years in a row, you might weigh nothing or negative at that point. Progress is rarely going to be linear like that. You are going to have periods of time where you might feel like you're at a plateau. You're going to have periods of time where you feel like you're going backwards, and perhaps periods of time where the data would even suggest that you are going backwards, where your scale weight is up or your strength is down. And I use those two. I'll talk a lot about those two sides of it, of things like losing body fat and building strength or building muscle, because those tend to be two of the biggest goals that I tend to see with my clients. And if you're listening to this, that might resonate with you as well. So recognizing that progress is not only not likely to be linear, but it's likely to be to be non-linear. That's a great mindset shift to have right from the beginning, of recognizing that if you're to graph, again, whatever metric you're looking at, but if you were to graph it over time, it's likely going to go up and down and stall out and go backwards and do all this crazy stuff that you would not expect. But that's why we look at trends over time, and that is something that I'm a huge fan of across any metric, which also leads into number three here, which is consistency over consecutiveness. And so that's related on the aspect of looking at trends over time. Consistency is, if you've been in the fitness world even peripherally online, you'll likely hear many messages talking about how, consistency, and how important that is. And that's a great message. I like to back it up with, why is consistency so important? And I like to back that up against the backdrop of looking at consecutiveness as something that is overrated. Consecutiveness is this idea that tends to pop up around this time of the year, every January, where you set out a goal that you're looking at achieving, and you look at the things that it's going to take to get to that goal, and you go, okay, day one, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this every single day of the week. And you get to maybe day 5 or 6, and then maybe you miss a day, whether it's a workout or a meal that's in line with your diet plan or whatever it is. You miss a day, and so now your streak has ended. You got 5 or 6 days into your streak of consecutiveness, and then all of a sudden you miss a day. And that sort of mentality of pursuing consecutiveness in your goals can really be a big setup for failure. And there's nothing wrong with being consecutive, and in fact, you might end up in a period of time where you are, very consistent in being consecutive with your goals and your actions that you're trying to take to achieve those. But if you're pursuing that consecutiveness in and of itself, you might be really disappointed when you miss. Let's just say you make it all the way to, 3.5 months in, and you make it to day 100, and you miss that 101st day. You might feel initially like those first 100 days all of a sudden don't count anymore, as if they are just gone, and the progress that you made is just was for naught because you miss a day. And that's why I really struggle with supporting programs like 75 hard, where it's 75 days of consecutive can't miss a day or you start over sort of mentality on lots of different things all at once. And there, I have some beef with a number of the techniques and methods of that program, but it's that same idea where it's much better to look at the consistency over time. So if you're looking at a month, for example, and you are wanting to start a new habit over the course of all of January or all of February, and you look at the course of your 30 days or so that you have, rather than thinking about how far into that 30 days that you made it before you failed or before you missed a day, look at, once you get to the end of that 30 days or 4 weeks or so, and look at how many of those days you were able to stick with your goals. And you'll likely be much more encouraged by the fact that, oh, you were able to stick to your goals I don't know, 75, 80% of the time, rather than thinking, oh, I only made it to day 4 before I missed a day. And that sort of mindset shift can be a really big game changer for your progress, both immediately and over time. Number 4, the beginning and the end are the easy parts of your program. So when you are pursuing a goal of any kind, you are likely going to have the most excitement and passion regarding your goals at the beginning of when you start and at the end of when you are hopefully accomplishing and nearly there toward your goal. So think about if you are setting a strength goal of you are wanting to learn how to bench press, and maybe your goal is to eventually bench press 135 pounds. You're likely going to be very excited and very passionate right at the beginning when you're learning and you're feeling like you're making progress, and you feel, you start to get those newbie gains in that sense where you are having a lot of fun doing your program, and you're also making a lot of progress at the beginning. Likewise, by the time that you get near to the end of your goal, let's say that your goal is to bench 135 pounds and you're at 130 pounds, you're likely going to be pushing pretty hard at that point because you're going to be really excited that you've made it that far. It's the middle ground that it's where it's easy to get lost, and it's easy to the true nature of being lost, of not having a plan from how to get from the beginning to the end. And that is something that my thought of what I wish I knew in this point is that it's not always going to be exciting from beginning to end, and that middle ground, you can kind of expect that it might feel like you're just doing the same boring old things over and over and over, and only making incremental progress some of the time. Just like point number 2, that progress isn't always going to be linear. And sometimes those stretches of time in the middle ground can really be demotivating if you're not prepared for that. Even if you recognize that it's going to be tough and that it might not be very exciting, that can really be a big game changer from whether you are ending up being successful or if you give up part way just because you weren't prepared for the fact that the middle ground is going to be maybe a little bit boring at times, and doing the same things might not feel like you're making progress, but in reality you're making little itty bits of progress even if it doesn't show up on the metrics that you're tracking. Number 5, it's okay to challenge and to change your initial goals. This is something that I have dealt with many times over, not just at the beginning of my fitness journey, but the idea being that whatever it was that initially got you into starting your fitness journey, or maybe a goal that you're having that you're working on right now, it's okay to challenge those. And over time, you might realize that goal is not as important to you as you thought it was, or is no longer as important to you as it used to be. uh, for me, I was one of those people again, going in from reading, Men's Health and Men's Fitness magazines, where you see all these fitness models with six packs and all that kind of stuff. Like that was kind of an initial starting point for me of thinking, oh yeah, I want to get a six pack, and that is no longer a priority by any means. But that's one of those things where it's okay to let go of a goal and to not frame it as giving up on that goal, but to think about, hey, maybe you've come across something that's more important to you than what it was that got you initially started. But you can still look back on some of those goals and go, okay, yeah, that was what got me started and got the ball rolling. But it's okay to change directions in your fitness journey rather than feeling like you need to carry out every single goal to its full end. It's just like I've learned this with reading books too, right? If you start a book, and maybe even if you get halfway through a book and you're thinking, I just don't know that this is worth the time that I'm putting into this, it's okay to put that book down and to never pick it back up. You don't have to finish every book that you start just for the sake of being able to say, oh, I did it. And that's something that I used to do on principle, was, oh, I have to finish this book. And same thing with your fitness goals too, is that you don't have to carry out a goal if it's no longer important to you. Number 6, and this is the last one of the principles half of all of this, is to use variety sparingly and strategically. So this kind of is tailors back to the very first point of progress being more exciting than variety. Variety is absolutely a tool that you can use, but it's not one that you probably want as your foundation of your program in order to keep it exciting and motivating and all of that. You can use variety sparingly in the sense of including it here and there when you truly do need it, as opposed to just for the sake of relying on variety in your programming, in your training programming, in your diet programming. And you can use it strategically too. So if you know that you are going to have a change of pace, either lifestyle wise, or if you're going to be doing a traveling or whatever it is, you can look forward to some of those kinds of things and build in some variety, knowing that you are going to be leveraging that to its full potential, as opposed to relying on it and leaning on it and hoping that variety just carries you through the boring middle ground that I spoke about earlier. All right, let's get into some of the specifics here. And this was supposed to be the shorter half of this, but it ended up being a full seven seven option or seven things here. So on the specific side of this here, the scale is one tool among many in your fitness toolbox. This is number 7 of the things that I wish that I had learned at the beginning of my fitness journey. The scale is one tool among many, and that I hope doesn't fall on deaf ears. I hope that that's something that resonates with you, in that even if you are pursuing a fitness goal that is largely centered around your scale weight, your body weight. So something like trying to lose weight or lose body fat, or you're trying to reach a certain body fat percentage, or whatever your goal may be. Even in those scenarios, the scale is still only a single tool in your fitness toolbox, and you have many many other metrics that you can be tracking, and that I would argue that you should be tracking alongside that, even if your goal would seemingly only be dictated based off of what the scale would say. And I'm not a huge advocate of doing that, but you have many other metrics and data points that you can be tracking alongside of it, that are going to create a more fluid, more full picture of what's actually going on. And again, this is going to help protect you against that middle ground, when if you're only using what the number that the scale is telling you, if you're only using that and it seems like it stalls out, or if it feels like it's going backwards, or if it says that it's going backwards of what your goal is, then you might get discouraged, when in reality, you might actually be making progress in different areas, and you just need to continue to be patient. So some of the other data points and tools that you have in your toolbox, think about your gains in strength, your hopefully not just fluctuating but decreasing levels of stress, your blood pressure, how much you're enjoying your training program, how your clothes fit and how they feel, your sleep quality. And, I could go on and on about all the different metrics that I use with training with my online clients, and that is so important to take a look at the big picture here. And even if your goal is very specific, even if it's I want to bench press 135 pounds, and you feel like you want to just track the weight that you're able to use on your bench press, that's not a recipe for failure, because it can be done, but you might be missing some bigger picture views of what's actually going on in your health and fitness. And that's something that I've always been a huge proponent of, is taking a look at your entirety of your fitness, and not just being so tunnel vision on the one goal that you have. Number 8, walking, super underrated. High intensity cardio, super overrated. Not to say that high intensity cardio or hit training or running, or anything like that is a bad thing. It's just overrated in the sense that this is something that at the beginning of my fitness journey I felt like I needed to do, was that I needed to go running. I needed to somehow enjoy running, and I still don't enjoy it. But the flip side of that is that walking is a great way to be able to spend your time in your fitness journey, both for your maybe your specific goals around fitness, but also just your overall health too. We now have a treadmill in our garage, and I can't tell you how much I love it, of just walking on it, even at a slow pace, and just reading a book or listening to a podcast, just like this one. Number 9, it's okay to feel uncomfortable a few weeks into a diet or building phase. And what I mean by that is, whether you are trying to lose body fat or you're trying to build up muscle, if you have any kind of goal that's related to body composition, it is likely, and it's okay, that you are going to feel uncomfortable a few weeks into that, because in a diet, if you're dieting down, you likely feel uncomfortable of feeling like, man, I'm a little hungry, I'm a little tired, I'm a little low energy, and I just want to quit. Likewise, on the flip side, the building phase of it, you might be feeling a little puffy a few weeks into your building or bulking phase and thinking, man, I am at an uncomfortably high body fat percentage based off of what the scale is telling me, based off of what the mirror is telling me. And you might, in either of these scenarios, be tempted to just give up and to constantly fluctuate back and forth between dieting down and building up and dieting down and building up. And you might not actually be making any real meaningful progress either on the fat loss side of it or on the muscle gain side of it. And so I want this point here, not that you need my permission, but I do want to share with you that it is okay and to be expected that you're headed into uncomfortable territory, no matter what your goal is, if it's related to body composition, and that it's worth just keep going in that direction. And the more that you're able to commit to that, then the more that it's going to make sense eventually to be able to flip to a maintenance phase or flip to the opposite side of the spectrum there too. Number 10, it is worth dialing in your training intensity and then adding in training volume. I spoke about training intensity and training volume in the last episode about the big debate between the two. And rather than focusing on which one's more important, I would say that the priority level is not so much which one's more important, but rather the order of them. And if you are thinking about starting up a new program or just a new type of program, it is absolutely worth figuring out your intensity levels and figuring out with the lifts that you're using, the exercises that you have in your program. It is worth figuring out how you can apply yourself well using great form, great technique, and to be able to apply the appropriate level of training intensity to that, as far as thinking about nearing your maximal training, your maximal capacity, and then at that point, once you've done that, adding in more training volume by way of adding in extra repetitions, extra sets, more workouts per week, things like that, rather than the other way around of adding in tons of training volume at the beginning and then trying to increase the intensity. I would not recommend that. Start with training intensity, dial that in, and then add the volume after that. Number 11, sleep and stress will either fill you or drain you. Both of these are worth keeping tabs on at all times. And this is beyond the scope of this episode here, but uh, I know that your stress levels and your sleep quantity and quality are not always going to be within your control to the degree that you wish they probably were. I know that's certainly the case for me. But it is worth having a plan around these in some capacity, and to take a look at, are there any ways that you can increase your sleep quantity or quality? Are there any ways that you can choose to decrease your stress by way of adding in things into your life, your schedule, or taking things out? It is definitely worth keeping tabs on both of those, and those are going to be the foundations that are going to allow you to add to your training, that are going to allow you to add to your diet and your overall health and fitness. And in the scope of this podcast here of being a better parent as well, I would argue that both of those are important. All right, we have 2 minutes here. Let's roll with this. Number 12, meal prep doesn't need to be pretty. I used to be inundated with Instagram meal prep and think that, I thought that it needed to be so organized and doing, 28 meals at a time and all of that kind of stuff. Don't worry about doing that. My meal prep currently looks like a big instant pot full of chicken at the beginning of the week and a rice cooker full of rice, putting those in one big container each, and then taking spoonfuls of those per meal, going from there throughout the rest of the week. And number 13, here's a quick one. It's okay to actually rest on rest days. I can't tell you how many times in various programs that I've run or that I've been a part of where I've seen the question of, what should I do on rest days? As if resting is the bad guy here. I love going on walks on rest days, but they're not mandatory. I just love doing that. And so, my message to you here is, if you want to take a rest day that looks like actual rest, find something else to fill up the space that you would normally be working out in, and take that time, do something that you enjoy, and you can go from there. So it's okay to actually rest on those. All right. That's it for today's episode. Thanks for hanging with me through my top 10, but actually 13 lists of things that I wish I knew when I started my fitness journey. If you learned anything new in this episode or found it helpful in any way or another, I would love for you to take a quick screenshot of the podcast now that you're at the end of it and post it to your story on social media. That would be a big help. Right now, that's the best way to introduce the Blue Shoes Fitness podcast to more parents just like yourself. All right. I'm Coach Jay. Thanks for hanging with me, and we'll see you next time.